In the harsh Colorado territory of 1878, a desperate rancher turned doctor places an ad for a mail-order bride, not just for love, but to save his blind daughter and his own wounded soul. But when the woman who answers carries secrets about his military past and a healing touch that could mend more than bodies, their lives take an unexpected turn that will challenge everything they thought they knew about forgiveness, family, and second chances. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow this incredible journey of healing love and the miracles that happen when two broken souls find each other in the untamed West. When a Union nurse's touch healed the broken cowboy doctor, their love changed everything. The October wind howled across Pine Ridge Valley like a mourning woman, carrying with it the first whispers of the brutal Colorado winter to come. Dr. Lucas Sterling, though no one had called him doctor for 3 long years, stood at the frost-etched window of his ranch house watching the storm clouds gather over the distant peaks. His weathered hands, once steady enough to extract bullets from dying soldiers, now trembled slightly as he gripped his lukewarm coffee. The advertisement he'd placed in the Philadelphia Inquirer 3 weeks ago felt like a betrayal of Sarah's memory. Yet what choice did he have? "Papa," the soft voice pulled him from his brooding. Isabella Bella, to those who loved her, felt her way carefully along the kitchen wall, her small fingers trailing the rope guide he'd installed after the fever took her sight 3 years ago. "I'm here, little sir," Luke said, his voice automatically gentling as he turned toward his 9-year-old daughter. Even blind Bella moved with a grace that reminded him painfully of her mother. "The lady is coming today, isn't she?" Bella's unseeing blue eyes. Sarah's eyes turned toward him with that uncanny accuracy she'd developed. "I can feel her in the wind." Luke's chest tightened. Since losing her sight, Bella had begun saying things like this, impossible things that somehow proved true. The doctor in him wanted to dismiss it as coincidence. The father in him had learned to listen. "The stagecoach should arrive this afternoon," he said carefully, "if the weather holds." But even as he spoke, the first fat snowflakes began to dance against the window panes. This wasn't the gentle snow of early winter. This was the kind of storm that buried the mountain passes and trapped people for days. Luke cursed under his breath, then caught himself. "Sorry, little star." "It's all right, Papa. Sometimes grown-up words are the only ones big enough for grown-up worries." Bella tilted her head, listening to something he couldn't hear. "She's still coming, though. The storm won't stop her." Before Luke could ask what she meant, the sound of hoofbeats reached them through the howling wind. Not the regular rhythm of the stagecoach, but the desperate gallop of a single horse pushed to its limits. Luke grabbed his coat and rifle from the door. "Stay inside, Bella." "Be careful, Papa. Something's wrong." Luke stepped onto the covered porch just as a horse and rider materialized from the swirling snow like phantoms. The horse, a sturdy bay mare, was lathered and exhausted. The rider, a woman bundled in a dark traveling cloak, swayed dangerously in the saddle. As Luke watched, she pitched forward and tumbled to the ground in a graceless heap, her body lying ominously still in the rapidly accumulating snow. "Bella," Luke called as he rushed toward the fallen woman. "Bring blankets and hot water." He knelt beside the unconscious stranger, his doctor's training taking over despite the years. Pulse rapid but steady, breathing shallow but regular. No visible blood, but her lips were blue with cold and her skin felt like ice. Luke gathered the woman into his arms, surprised by how light she was, and carried her toward the house. As he climbed the porch steps, her hood fell back, revealing auburn hair that caught the lamplight like burnished copper, and a face that was both beautiful and somehow familiar. "Is she the lady, Papa?" Bella asked as Luke carried the stranger through the door. "I don't know, little star. Right now she's just someone who needs our help." Luke laid the woman on the sofa near the fireplace and began the familiar ritual of treating hypothermia, something he'd done countless times for soldiers caught in winter campaigns. As he worked removing her wet outer garments and wrapping her in warm blankets, he found himself studying her face. She was older than he'd expected from her letters, perhaps 28 or 29, with laugh lines around her eyes and calluses on her hands that spoke of hard work. There was something about the set of her jaw, even in unconsciousness, that suggested determination and strength. "She's very pretty," Bella said, settling into her chair by the fire. "And she smells like medicine and sadness." Luke's hand stilled. "Medicine? Yes, like the bottles you keep hidden in the barn. the ones that make you cry sometimes. Heat flooded Luke's cheeks. He thought his nighttime visits to his old medical supplies were secret, but Bella's enhanced senses missed nothing. How can you smell sadness, little star? Bella considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. It's like rain that never falls. It just stays heavy in the air around her. Before Luke could respond, the woman's eyelids fluttered. She drew a sharp breath and tried to sit up, her green eyes wide and disoriented. Easy, Luke said, gently pressing her back against the cushions. You're safe. You collapsed outside my ranch. I'm Lucas Sterling. The woman's gaze darted between Luke and Bella, taking in their surroundings with the quick assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating situations rapidly. I'm Evangeline Morrison, she said, her voice hoarse but cultured, carrying just a trace of Philadelphia refinement. I believe you are expecting me. Luke felt something shift in his chest, relief mixed with an unexpected flutter of nervousness. You're the lady from the matrimonial agency. Eva tried to sit up again, more successfully this time. I am, though I'm afraid I've made rather a dramatic first impression. The stagecoach. Broke an axle 15 miles back, Eva explained. The driver suggested I might freeze to death waiting for rescue, so I borrowed a horse from a way station and rode ahead of the storm. She managed a weak smile. Clearly, I overestimated my equestrian abilities. Bella spoke up from her chair. You rode through a blizzard to get here. Eva's gaze shifted to the child, and Luke saw something soft and warm enter her expression. You must be Isabella. Your father wrote about you in his letters. Most people call me Bella, and yes, I'm the blind one. There was no self-pity in Bella's voice, just matter-of-fact acceptance. I prefer to think of you as the one who sees things others miss, Eva said quietly. There's a difference among Luke watched his daughter's face transform with surprised delight. Most adults either ignored Bella's blindness entirely or focused on it too much. Eva had somehow found the perfect middle ground. Are you hungry? Luke asked. I could make some soup. That's very kind, but I should probably... Eva tried to stand and immediately swayed, her face going pale. You should probably rest, Luke said firmly, his medical training overriding social awkwardness. You've just recovered from mild hypothermia. Your body needs time to stabilize. Eva sank back onto the sofa, looking frustrated. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, Bella said with the directness of childhood. You're supposed to be here. I can feel it. An awkward silence settled over the room. Luke found himself studying Eva's face in the firelight, noting the intelligence in her green eyes and the way she unconsciously assessed Bella's movements, as if cataloging the child's capabilities rather than her limitations. Your letter mentioned you have experience with children who have special needs, Luke said finally. Yes. Eva's voice grew quieter, more professional. I worked with soldiers who'd lost limbs or sight during the war. Many of them were barely more than boys. I learned that the human spirit is remarkably adaptable when given the right tools and encouragement. What kind of tools? Bella asked, clearly intrigued. Eva smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Luke had seen from her. Well, for someone like you, we might start with teaching your fingers to read. There's a system called Braille developed by a Frenchman. It uses raised dots to represent letters. Bella's entire face lit up. I could read real books, real letters, real anything you wanted. Eva's voice grew stronger with enthusiasm. Your father mentioned in his letters that you're very intelligent. I suspect you'd master it quickly. Luke felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. In 3 years, no one had suggested that Bella could learn to read again. They'd all focused on what she'd lost, not what she might gain. There are other things too, Eva continued. Ways to navigate using sound and touch techniques for identifying objects and people, even methods for determining colors through texture and temperature. Colors, Bella breathed. Different fabrics hold heat differently. Silk feels cooler than wool, for instance. And sounds change depending on the size and shape of rooms, the materials they're made from. Eva leaned forward, her earlier exhaustion seemingly forgotten. You could learn to see your world in entirely new ways. Luke watched his daughter's face transform with hope and realized he was looking at a miracle. Not the dramatic kind from Sunday sermons, but the quiet kind that came from human knowledge and compassion. I could teach you, Eva said softly, if you'd like. Yes, Bella said immediately. Yes, please. Eva's gaze met Luke's over Bella's head, and he saw a question there. Not about Bella's capabilities, but about his willingness to let his daughter grow and change. We'd be grateful for any help you could offer, Luke said quietly. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that this arrangement might be about more than just convenience or necessity. But before Luke could examine the feeling too closely, Eva stifled a yawn. You need rest, he said. The spare room is upstairs, second door on the right. We can talk more in the morning. As Eva gathered her strength to stand, Bella spoke up again. Miss Eva, are you going to stay with us? Really stay? Eva paused her hand on the sofa arm. That depends on many things, Bella. But you want to, the child pressed. I can feel that you want to, but you're scared of something. Luke saw Eva's composure crack slightly. Sometimes wanting something and being able to have it are two different things. Not always, Bella said with the confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate the world without sight. Sometimes the wanting is what makes everything else possible. That night, after Eva had retired to the guest room and Bella was tucked safely in bed, Luke sat alone by the dying fire thinking about second chances and the courage required to accept them. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside something had shifted. The house felt alive in a way it hadn't since Sarah's death, not just occupied, but inhabited by hope. Luke pulled out the bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes and poured himself a small measure. As he sipped it, he thought about Eva's hands, capable hands, that spoke of experience with suffering and healing. Hands that might be gentle enough to help his daughter navigate her changed world. And if those same hands might also help heal the wounds in his own soul, well, that was a possibility he wasn't quite ready to examine. But as he climbed the stairs to his own cold bed, Luke found himself hoping that the storm would last a little longer, giving them all time to discover what might be possible when three wounded souls found themselves under the same roof. In her room, Eva lay awake listening to the wind and thinking about the kindness in Lucas Sterling's eyes. She'd come to Colorado territory with a specific purpose to learn the truth about her father's actions during the war. She'd expected to find a broken-down rancher desperate enough to marry a stranger. Instead, she'd found a man who had sacrificed his calling to raise his daughter alone, a child whose courage put most adults to shame, and a home that felt more welcoming than any place she'd ever lived. The guilt of her deception sat heavy on her chest, but Eva pushed it aside. Tomorrow she would begin earning her place here honestly by helping Bella learn to navigate her world with confidence and joy. Everything else, including the secrets she carried about the war and the real reason she'd answered Lucas Sterling's advertisement, could wait. For tonight, it was enough to lie in a warm bed, listening to the storm, knowing that just down the hall was a man who looked at his blind daughter and saw infinite possibility, and a child who somehow sensed the good intentions Eva carried despite her hidden motives. Perhaps Bella was right. Perhaps wanting something was enough to make it possible. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside Pine Ridge Ranch, three hearts began the delicate dance of becoming a family. The next morning dawned clear and blindingly bright, with fresh snow covering the world in pristine white. Luke woke to the sound of laughter, actual laughter coming from the kitchen. He dressed quickly and padded downstairs in his stocking feet, following the wonderful sound he hadn't heard in his house for 3 years. He found Eva and Bella at the kitchen table, their heads bent together over what appeared to be a collection of small stones arranged in careful patterns. Good morning, Eva said, looking up with a smile that made Luke's chest do something peculiar. She'd braided her auburn hair back in a practical style, and the morning light streaming through the windows turned her green eyes almost emerald. What are you two conspiring about? Luke asked, settling into his usual chair. Miss Eva is teaching me to read with rocks, Bella announced, her face glowing with excitement. Each pattern of dots means a different letter. Luke leaned closer and saw that Eva had indeed arranged small pebbles in various configurations on the wooden table. It's a simplified version of Braille, Eva explained. Eventually we'll use paper with actual raised dots, but this gives Bella the basic concept. Luke watched his daughter's fingers move over the stone patterns with intense concentration. What does this one say? He asked. Bella, Bella spelled out proudly. It's my name. The joy in his daughter's voice nearly undid Luke completely. How many nights had he lain awake wondering if Bella would ever experience the simple pleasure of reading again? That's remarkable, he said, his voice rougher than intended. Bella is a natural student, Eva said warmly. I suspect she'll be reading full sentences within a week. As if summoned by the mention of her abilities, Bella suddenly tilted her head toward the window. Papa, someone's coming. 3 horses, riding fast. Luke frowned and moved to the window. Sure enough, 3 riders were approaching across the snow-covered valley, their mounts kicking up small clouds of powder. I don't recognize them, Luke said, reaching instinctively for the rifle he kept by the door. Eva went very still, her face pale. What do they look like? 2 men in dark coats, one in military blue. Luke's blood ran cold as the riders drew closer. The one in uniform. He's wearing general's insignia. If possible, Eva went even paler. General's insignia? You know him. Luke's voice sharpened. Before Eva could answer, Bella spoke up quietly. Miss Eva is scared, Papa. Really, really scared. The riders pulled up in front of the house with military precision. The man in uniform dismounted and approached the porch with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Luke opened the door before the man could knock, keeping his rifle visible, but not quite threatening. Mr. Sterling, the officer said. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. I'm General Cornelius Morrison. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Luke's gaze flicked to Eva, who had gone white as the snow outside. And what would that be? My daughter. Morrison's cold blue eyes found Eva through the doorway. Hello, Evangeline. It's time to come home. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Bella's sharp intake of breath. Papa, she whispered. The bad feelings just got much worse. Luke found himself facing a choice that would define everything that came after. He could step aside and let this general claim his daughter, ending the brief hope that had entered his house. Or he could stand his ground and fight for the woman who had given his daughter back her dreams of reading. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, General, Luke said quietly, stepping fully into the doorway. Miss Morrison is here of her own free will as my intended bride. Morrison's laugh was sharp and humorless. Intended bride, my dear Sterling, do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I know she's the woman who taught my daughter to read her first word in 3 years, Luke replied steadily. And I know she's welcome in my home for as long as she chooses to stay. Behind him, he heard Eva draw a shaky breath. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than he'd expected. Hello, Father, she said, moving to stand beside Luke. You're a long way from Philadelphia. Not nearly as far as you are from where you belong, Morrison replied coldly. Get your things, Evangeline. We're leaving. No. The simple word hung in the air like a challenge. Morrison's expression darkened. I beg your pardon. I said no. Ava's voice grew stronger with each word. I'm a grown woman, and I'll make my own choices about where I belong. You belong with your family, not playing house with some frontier doctor. Luke felt his blood freeze. How did you know I was a doctor? Morrison smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Oh, I know quite a lot about you, Dr. Sterling, including why you stopped practicing medicine. The words hit Luke like a physical blow. Beside him, he felt Eva stiffen. Papa. Bella's voice was small and frightened. What's happening? Before anyone could answer, Morrison continued. Did you tell your intended about the soldiers who died under your care, Doctor? About why you really came west? Luke's vision tunneled. The old nightmare's blood-soaked operating tables, faces of boys he couldn't save. The crushing weight of impossible choices came flooding back. That's enough, Eva said sharply, stepping protectively in front of Luke. Leave him alone. Interesting, Morrison observed. You defend him, yet you don't even know why he stopped being a doctor, do you? Shall I tell you about the field hospital outside Richmond? About the epidemic that killed half his patients because he couldn't diagnose it in time? Stop, Luke whispered, but the words kept coming. Or perhaps you'd prefer to hear about his wife. How she died giving birth because the nearest real doctor lived 50 miles away, and our hero here couldn't save her. The silence that followed was deafening. Luke felt exposed raw, as if Morrison had stripped away 3 years of carefully constructed healing. Is that true, Papa? Bella's voice was barely audible. Luke's throat closed completely. How could he explain to his daughter that her mother's death was his fault? That every medical decision he'd failed to make correctly had led to this moment. Lucas. Eva's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. Somehow Luke found the strength to meet her eyes. Is that why you stopped practicing medicine? She asked quietly. Luke nodded, unable to trust his voice. And you've been carrying that guilt for 3 years. Another nod. Eva reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle but sure. You couldn't save everyone. No doctor can. That doesn't make you a failure, it makes you human. But Sarah died from complications that might have happened even in the best hospital in Philadelphia, Eva said firmly. I've seen enough war casualties to know the difference between medical error and tragic circumstance. Morrison cleared his throat impatiently. How touching. But this changes nothing, Evangeline. You're coming with me. No, she isn't. Everyone turned toward Bella, who had risen from her chair and was walking toward them with careful, determined steps. Bella, go back inside, Luke said automatically. No, Papa. Bella stopped directly in front of Morrison, her sightless eyes somehow finding his face with uncanny precision. You're the one who needs to leave. Morrison looked down at the blind child with something between amusement and annoyance. Little girl, this is adult business. You're sad. Bella interrupted, her voice filled with the matter-of-fact certainty she brought to all her observations. Really, really sad. And angry, but mostly sad. Morrison's expression flickered. Don't be ridiculous. You lost someone, Bella continued unperturbed. Someone important. And now you think if you can control Miss Eva, it will make the sadness go away. But it won't. It'll just make more sadness. Luke stared at his daughter in amazement. How could a 9-year-old child see so clearly into a man's heart? You don't know what you're talking about, Morrison said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. I know what it feels like to lose someone you love, Bella said simply. I lost my mama and Papa, lost his wife, and Miss Eva lost someone too, but we found each other, and that made the sadness smaller. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, his cold mask slipping slightly. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but no less determined. Evangeline, you don't understand the situation. There are things about your past, about my past, that you need to know. Then tell me, Eva said quietly, but tell me here with people who care about me. Luke felt something shift in the air between them. Whatever secrets these two shared, they were about to come to light. Morrison glanced at his men, then back at Eva. Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old guilt. Dr. Sterling, do you remember a field hospital outside Fredericksburg in December of 1862? You were treating soldiers from the 15th Pennsylvania Infantry. Luke's blood turned to ice. How do you? Because I was the commanding officer who ordered those boys into battle, knowing they were already sick with fever. Morrison's voice was steady, but Luke could see the pain in his eyes. I needed that position taken, and they were the only unit available. Half of them died in your medical tent. Luke stared at the general memories flooding back. The boys, because that's what they'd been, just boys burning with fever, crying for their mothers as they died. He'd been helpless to save them, watching one after another slip away despite his best efforts. You killed them, Luke whispered. Yes, Morrison said simply. I did, just as surely as if I'd shot them myself. Eva was looking between them, her face white with understanding. The letters, she whispered. The letters I found in your study after Mother died. They were from the families of those soldiers. Morrison nodded. 23 boys died because of my decision. Their families wrote to me afterward. Some cursing me, some begging to understand why their sons had to die. He looked at Eva with something that might have been love, mixed with regret. I kept every letter. I read them every night for 18 years. And that's why you came west, Eva asked. To find Dr. Sterling. To ask his forgiveness, Morrison said quietly, and to make amends if possible. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of old grief and shared guilt. Finally, Luke spoke. You want my forgiveness for sending sick boys into battle? I want to stop carrying the weight of their deaths alone, Morrison replied. Just as you want to stop carrying the weight of not being able to save them. Luke looked at this man who had haunted his nightmares not as a faceless general, but as a father carrying the same burden of guilt that had driven Luke from medicine. The epidemic, Luke said slowly, The one that killed half my patients. It started with those boys from Pennsylvania. Morrison nodded. The fever spread through the ranks before the battle. I should have pulled them back, should have waited for reinforcements. But the position was strategic, and I thought, he trailed off, shaking his head. I thought winning the battle would justify the cost. Did it? No battle is worth 23 boys' lives, Morrison said simply. It took me 18 years to admit that. Bella, who had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention she brought to all important conversations, suddenly spoke up. You're both carrying sadness that's too big for one person, she said matter-of-factly. Maybe if you shared it, it wouldn't be so heavy. Luke stared down at his daughter, amazed once again by her wisdom. And besides, Bella continued, Miss Eva loves us now. Don't you, Miss Eva? All eyes turned to Eva, who stood frozen in the doorway, her face reflecting a dozen conflicting emotions. She began, then stopped, looking at Luke with something that might have been hope. I came here to learn the truth about my father's war service. I thought understanding what kind of man he was might help me understand why he was always so distant, so cold. Morrison flinched, but Eva continued. But I found something I wasn't looking for. Her voice grew stronger, more certain. I found a man who sacrificed his calling to raise his daughter with love and devotion. I found a child whose courage puts most adults to shame. I found a home where I was welcomed, not for what I could provide, but for who I am. She turned to Morrison, tears in her eyes. I love you, Father, but I love them too. And for the first time in my life, I have a choice about where I belong. And where is that? Morrison asked quietly. Eva looked at Luke, her green eyes bright with unshed tears and unmistakable love. Wherever they'll have me. Luke felt his heart stop, then restart with painful intensity. Eva, I know this is complicated, she said quickly. I know there are things we need to work through, truths we need to face. But I also know that in one day you and Bella have made me feel more at home than I have ever felt anywhere. Luke stepped towards her, his hands reaching up to frame her face as she had done for him earlier. Are you sure? Because once you choose this life, choose us, there's no going back. Eva smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night. I've never been more sure of anything. Even though I'm a failed doctor who couldn't save his own wife. Especially because you're a man who loves so deeply that losing her nearly destroyed you, but you kept going for your daughter's sake. Eva's voice was fierce with a conviction. That's not failure, Lucas. That's heroism. Luke kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise, while Bella clapped her hands in delight, and Morrison watched with an expression that was equal parts loss and acceptance. When they broke apart, Morrison cleared his throat. Well, he said gruffly, I suppose congratulations are in order. You're welcome to stay for the wedding, Luke said, surprised by his own generosity. Morrison considered this, then shook his head. I think it's time I learned to let my daughter make her own choices. He looked at Eva with something that might have been pride. But I would like to write to you if you are willing. Perhaps we can find a way to heal some of the old wounds. Eva nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'd like that very much. As Morrison and his men prepared to leave, Bella tugged on Eva's skirt. Miss Eva, are you really going to stay with us forever? Eva knelt down to Bella's level, taking the child's hands in hers. If you'll have me. But I should warn you, I snore, I'm terrible at cooking, and I have very strong opinions about the proper way to organize a medicine cabinet. Bella giggled, actually giggled. Papa snores too, and he's not very good at cooking either. And you can organize whatever you want as long as you keep teaching me to read. Deal, Eva said solemnly and sealed it with a hug. 3 months later, on the first warm day of spring, Eva and Luke were married in the little church in Pine Ridge with Bella as their flower girl and half the territory in attendance. Morrison had surprised everyone by returning for the ceremony, and he walked Eva down the aisle with quiet dignity. Elder Joseph Crowfeather offered a Ute blessing for the new family, and Doc Matthews, who had become Luke's mentor as he slowly returned to practicing medicine, served as best man. But the moment Luke would remember most wasn't the vows or the kiss or even Eva's radiant smile as she became his wife. It was afterward, as they stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, when Bella suddenly looked up at them with perfect accuracy and said, I can see you, Papa, both of you, Maybe not with my eyes, but with my heart. And you're beautiful. Luke pulled both his girls close, marveling at the miracle of second chances and the healing power of love. He'd thought his life was over when he lost his recovery, thought his calling as a healer had died with her. But Eva had shown him that some wounds, when properly tended, could heal stronger than they'd ever been before. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most broken things could be made whole again by the simple act of choosing to love and be loved in return. As the stars came out over Pine Ridge Valley, three hearts beat in harmony, creating a rhythm of love that would echo through all the years to come. The mail-order bride who had arrived in a snowstorm had indeed been exactly what they'd needed, not to replace what was lost, but to help them discover what was possible when wounded souls found the courage to heal together. And in the end, that was the greatest miracle of all. The weeks following Morrison's departure settled into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Luke found himself waking each morning with something he'd forgotten existed: anticipation for the day ahead. Eva had transformed their home in ways both subtle and profound. She'd rearranged the kitchen to make it more accessible for Bella, hung herbs to dry from the rafters, and somehow made the whole house smell like hope and healing. But it was the evenings Luke treasured most. After supper, when the dishes were cleared and the fire banked, Eva would sit with Bella at the kitchen table, guiding the child's fingers over increasingly complex patterns of raised dots. And Luke would watch from his chair, marveling at the sight of his daughter's face bright with the joy of learning. "Papa," Bella said one evening in early November, "listen to this." Her small fingers moved across the paper Eva had specially ordered from Denver, and she began to read aloud. "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." Luke's throat tightened. "That's wonderful, little star. It uses every letter in the alphabet," Eva explained, her voice warm with pride. "Bella mastered the entire system in just 6 weeks." "I want to read real books now," Bella announced. "Stories about adventures in faraway places." "I've ordered some from back east," Eva said. "They should arrive with the next supply wagon." Luke watched the easy affection between Eva and his daughter and felt his chest expand with something dangerously close to complete happiness. It was a feeling that made him nervous. In his experience, perfect moments like these were usually followed by loss. As if reading his thoughts, Eva looked up and caught his expression. "What are you thinking about?" "Just this, all of it." Luke gestured around the warm kitchen. "Sometimes I worry it's too good to last." Eva said to me. Eva set down her teaching materials and moved to his chair. Without hesitation, she settled onto his lap, her arms going around his neck. The casual intimacy of it still took his breath away. "What if it doesn't have to end?" she asked softly. "What if this is just the beginning?" Luke buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of lavender and something uniquely Eva. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." Eva pulled back to look at him, her green eyes serious. "We've all been through enough loss, Lucas. Maybe it's time to trust in something good." Bella, who had been pretending not to listen, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Eva is right, Papa. The bad feelings are getting smaller every day. And the good feelings," she smiled, "the good feelings are getting so big sometimes I think they might lift the whole house right off the ground." Luke laughed despite himself. "We can't have that. The chickens would be very confused." "They'd probably like flying," Bella said seriously. "Mrs. Henderson would be jealous, though." Mrs. Henderson was their prize hen, notorious for her bad temper and territorial nature. The idea of her soaring through the sky with ruffled dignity made them all laugh. It was moments like these that Luke treasured most, the easy warmth of family life, the simple bond of shared laughter. But their peaceful interlude was shattered the next morning, when Tommy Reeves, the young man who worked their nearest neighbor's ranch, came pounding up to their door at dawn. "Mr. Sterling," he called, tumbling off his horse in his haste. "You gotta come quick. There's been an accident." Luke was already reaching for his coat and the medical bag he'd reluctantly retrieved from the barn the week before. "What kind of accident?" "Rock slide up at Morrison's Creek. 3 men trapped, maybe more. Doc Matthews is out at the Carlson place with their baby, and you're the only other doctor for 50 miles. Luke felt the familiar cold grip of medical responsibility close around his heart. He hadn't treated serious trauma since the war, hadn't trusted himself with life-and-death decisions since Sarah's death. "Lucas," Eva's voice was calm but firm. "You have to go." "I can't." The words came out harsher than he'd intended. I'm not, I can't be responsible for saving lives. Eva stepped closer, her hand finding his arm. For being the healer you were born to be. What if I make it worse? What if someone dies because I'm not good enough anymore? Eva's grip tightened. What if someone dies because you're not there at all? The logic was unassailable, but logic did nothing to quiet the fear clawing at Luke's chest. I'll come with you, Eva said quietly. I have field experience. We can work together. Miss Eva, Tommy interrupted. Begging your pardon, but there ain't time for debate. Men are dying up there. Luke looked at Eva, then at Bella, who had come to stand in the doorway. Go, Papa, Bella said softly. People need you, and Miss Eva will make sure you remember how good you are at helping people. The faith in his daughter's voice was like a physical push. Luke grabbed his medical bag and headed for the door Eva closed behind. Stay with Mrs. Rodriguez, he called to Bella. We'll be back as soon as we can. The ride to Morrison's Creek took 20 minutes of hard galloping through rough terrain. When they arrived, Luke saw immediately that the situation was as bad as Tommy had described. A section of the creek bank had collapsed, trapping 3 men under tons of rock and debris. 2 had been partially freed by the other miners, but they were both unconscious and badly injured. The third was still trapped from the waist down awake, but clearly in shock. Thank God, said Jake Morrison, no relation to the general who ran the small mining operation. We've been trying to keep them stable, but Luke knelt beside the first injured man and felt his doctor's training take over. Broken ribs, possible internal bleeding, definite head trauma. The second man had a compound fracture of his left arm and was showing signs of severe blood loss. Eva, Luke said, his voice steady and sure for the first time in 3 years. I need you to start an IV on the man with the arm fracture while I assess the head injury. Already on it, Eva replied, her movements quick and efficient as she prepared the medical supplies. For the next 4 hours, Luke operated with a skill and confidence he'd thought he'd lost forever. He set bones, sutured wounds, and made the dozens of small but crucial decisions that meant the difference between life and death. And through it all, Eva was beside him, anticipating his needs, providing steady hands when his threatened to shake, offering the kind of professional partnership he'd never experienced, even during the war. When the last patient was stabilized and ready for transport to the town's medical facility, Luke finally allowed himself to breathe. You did it, Eva said quietly, her voice warm with admiration. You saved all 3 of them. Luke looked down at his hands, steady now, sure of their purpose. We did it. I couldn't have managed without you. Yes, you could have, Eva said firmly, but I'm glad you didn't have to. The ride home was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they were unsaddling their horses that Eva spoke again. How do you feel? Luke considered the question seriously. Like myself again. For the first time in 3 years, I feel like myself. Eva smiled. Good, because Pine Ridge needs a doctor and you were born to heal people. We were born to heal people, Luke corrected. That is, if you're willing to be my partner in more than just marriage. Eva's smile widened. Are you offering me a job, Dr. Sterling? I'm offering you everything, Luke said, pulling her into his arms. A partnership in medicine and life, in whatever comes next. Eva stood on her toes to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Then yes, to all of it. Yes. That evening, as they sat by the fire with Bella curled between them, Luke felt the last of his old wounds finally begin to heal. He'd spent 3 years believing that losing Sarah meant losing his purpose, his calling, his ability to trust his own judgment. But Eva had shown him that healing came in many forms. Sometimes it meant saving lives in dramatic fashion. Sometimes it meant teaching a blind child to read. And sometimes it meant simply choosing to open your heart to love again, despite the risk of loss. Papa, Bella said sleepily, her head resting against his shoulder. Yes, little star. I'm proud of you for helping those men today and for letting yourself be happy again. Luke pressed a kiss to the top of Bella's head, marveling at his daughter's wisdom. I'm learning, little star. We're all learning. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Luke tensed his hand, automatically moving to the rifle by his chair. Easy, Eva said, though he could see the concern in her eyes. It could be anything. The rider pulled up hard in front of their house, and Luke recognized young Billy Chen and Mrs. Chen's teenage son. Mr. Sterling, Miss Morrison, Billy called. You got to come to town right away. Luke opened the door, his medical bag already in his hand. What's the emergency? It's not medical, Billy panted, trying to catch his breath. It's legal. There's a man at the sheriff's office, says he's got papers to arrest Miss Morrison for desertion from the Army Medical Corps. Luke felt Eva go rigid beside him. What? Says she ran away from her post back east without permission. Says she's wanted for questioning about missing medical supplies and patient deaths. Eva's face had gone white as snow. No, she whispered. That's not. I didn't desert. I was discharged. Ma'am, Billy said respectfully, I'm just telling you what the man said. Sheriff Coleman wants to see you both right away. Luke's mind raced. This had to be connected to Morrison's earlier threats, some kind of retaliation for Eva's refusal to return with him. Billy, he said carefully, what did this man look like? Tall, thin, wearing a fancy city suit, had a real official-looking badge and everything? Billy paused. Oh, and he knew an awful lot about your medical practice during the war, Mr. Sterling. Asked a lot of questions about that epidemic you couldn't stop. Luke felt ice form in his veins. Someone was digging into both their pasts, using their old guilt and trauma as weapons against them. We'll be right there, Luke said grimly. Billy, can you ask Mrs. Rodriguez to come stay with Bella? Already done, sir. Ma sent her over soon as we heard. As Billy rode away, Luke turned to Eva, who was staring at nothing with the blank expression of someone reliving old nightmares. Eva. He took her hands, feeling how cold they were. Look at me. Her green eyes focused on his face with obvious effort. Lucas, if they arrest me, they're not going to arrest you. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. Luke's voice was steady and sure. Tell me the truth. What really happened with the medical corps? Eva took a shaky breath. There was corruption at the hospital. Officers were selling medical supplies on the black market, while soldiers died for lack of medicine. I tried to report it through proper channels, but you were just a nurse, and they were officers, Luke finished grimly. I started stealing supplies back from the black market dealers and using them to treat patients. Some of the sickest men recovered, but others. Eva's voice broke. Others died anyway, and when the investigation started, they blamed me. Said I was the one stealing and selling supplies. So you left. I was discharged under suspicious circumstances. Not court-martialed, but not cleared either. I hoped coming west would let me start over. Luke cupped her face in his hands. It will. We won't let anyone destroy what we've built here. But even as he spoke the words, Luke wondered if they were about to face their greatest test yet. Someone with power and influence was targeting them both, using their pasts as weapons. The question was who and why they were about to find out. The ride to town was tense and silent, both of them lost in dark thoughts. Pine Ridge's main street was busier than usual for evening, with knots of people talking in low voices outside the general store and saloon. Sheriff Coleman's office was a small building next to the jail, and Luke could see lights spilling from the windows. As they dismounted, the sheriff himself appeared in the doorway. Luke, Miss Morrison, he said, his weathered face grim. Appreciate you coming so quick. What's this about Jim? Luke asked. He'd known Coleman for 3 years and had always found him to be a fair, reasonable man. Got a federal marshal here with some serious accusations, Coleman replied. Says Miss Morrison is wanted for questioning back east about some Army medical supply business. And you believe him? Coleman shrugged. Got official-looking papers. But I'll be honest, something about this whole thing sits wrong with me. Figured I'd hear your side before I did anything official. Luke felt a flicker of hope. If Coleman was willing to listen. Where is this marshal? Eva asked, her voice steadier than Luke had expected. Inside. Fair warning, he's got some harsh things to say about both of you. They followed Coleman into his office, where a thin man in an expensive suit was seated behind the sheriff's desk, as if he owned it. Luke disliked him immediately. Ah, the fugitive arrives, the man said, rising with theatrical flourish. Miss Morrison, you've led us quite a chase. I'm not a fugitive, Eva said calmly. I was discharged from service and moved west, which is perfectly legal. Discharged under suspicion of theft and medical malpractice, the man countered. I'm Marshal Theodore Blackwood, and I have orders to bring you back east for questioning. Luke went very still. Did you say Blackwood? The marshal smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Indeed, you seem surprised, Dr. Sterling. Surely you remember my brother Nathan. You served under him during the war. Luke's blood turned to ice. Nathan Blackwood had been one of the most corrupt officers in the medical corps, a man who'd sold supplies while soldiers died and then blamed the resulting deaths on incompetent doctors. Your brother was relieved of command for corruption, Luke said carefully. My brother was scapegoated by incompetent field medics who couldn't do their jobs properly, Blackwood replied coldly. But that's neither here nor there. I'm here for Miss Morrison. On whose authority? Sheriff Coleman interjected. Blackwood produced a set of official-looking documents. Federal warrant for questioning in matters of military justice. Luke scanned the papers quickly. They looked official, but something felt wrong. These are dated last month, he observed. If Eva has been wanted for questioning for years, why the sudden urgency? New evidence has come to light, Blackwood said smoothly. Evidence that suggests Miss Morrison's theft and incompetence directly contributed to the deaths of over 30 soldiers. That's a lie, Eva's composure finally cracked. I saved lives, not cost them. Then you won't mind coming back east to prove it. Blackwood smiled. Unless, of course, you have something to hide. Luke stepped protectively in front of Eva. She's not going anywhere with you. I'm afraid she doesn't have a choice. Neither do you, for that matter. Blackwood's smile widened. You see, Dr. Sterling, new evidence suggests you were complicit in the medical supply thefts. As her accomplice. The accusation hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Luke felt the familiar weight of old guilt and new fear pressing down on his chest. That's impossible, Coleman said firmly. Luke wasn't even in the same unit as Miss Morrison during the war. Ah, but they were in contact. Blackwood produced another document. I have here a letter written by Dr. Sterling to his commanding officer requesting additional medical supplies for epidemic cases. Supplies that interestingly went missing from Miss Morrison's hospital around the same time. Luke stared at the paper, his heart sinking. He remembered writing that letter, remembered his desperate attempts to get medicine for the dying Pennsylvania boys. You're connecting coincidences and calling them evidence, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I connecting a conspiracy that's been hiding in plain sight for 15 years? Blackwood's voice was oily with satisfaction. A corrupt nurse and a failed doctor working together to profit from soldiers' misery. Stop. The voice was quiet but carried an authority that made everyone turn. Eva stepped out from behind Luke, her face pale but determined. If you want to destroy someone's reputation with lies and half-truths, Marshal Blackwood, destroy mine. But leave Lucas out of it. Eva, no, Luke said sharply. He's innocent. Eva continued, ignoring Luke's protest. Whatever you think you can prove about me, he had nothing to do with it. He was trying to save lives with whatever supplies he could get, just like any good doctor would. Blackwood's eyes gleamed. So you admit to theft? I admit to taking back medical supplies that your brother was selling on the black market instead of using them to treat wounded soldiers, Eva said steadily. If that's theft, then I'm guilty. Eva, don't say another word, Luke warned, but it was too late. Excellent, Blackwood said, pulling out a pair of shackles. Miss Morrison, you're under arrest for theft of military property and conspiracy to defraud the United States Army. Now hold on, Coleman interrupted. This is my jurisdiction, and I say... He was cut off by the sound of the office door opening. Everyone turned to see General Morrison enter, flanked by two men in military uniform. Marshal Blackwood, Morrison said mildly. What an unexpected pleasure. Blackwood's confident expression faltered. General Morrison, I wasn't aware you were in Colorado territory. Clearly, otherwise you might have done some research before making such serious accusations against my daughter. Luke felt Eva stiffen beside him. Morrison's unexpected arrival changed everything, but Luke couldn't tell if it was for better or worse. Your daughter is a fugitive from military justice, Blackwood said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. My daughter is a decorated Army nurse who served with distinction for 4 years, Morrison replied coolly. I have her full service record here, along with testimony from a dozen officers who can verify her character and competence. Morrison handed Coleman a thick folder. Sheriff, you'll find that Miss Morrison was honorably discharged after exposing a corruption ring that had been stealing medical supplies. The investigation she initiated led to the court-martial of several officers, including Colonel Nathan Blackwood. Blackwood's face went white. That's impossible. My brother was cleared of all charges. Your brother died in military prison 6 months ago, Morrison said bluntly, but not before he confessed to the full extent of his crimes, including his attempts to frame innocent medical personnel to cover his tracks. Luke felt the world tilt around him. You mean, the epidemic that killed those Pennsylvania boys was prolonged because Colonel Blackwood had sold the medicine they needed, Morrison continued. Dr. Sterling, far from being complicit, was one of the victims of his corruption. Blackwood was backing toward the door, his face a mask of rage and frustration. This isn't over. I'll find another way. No, Morrison's voice was sharp with command. You won't, because attempting to arrest a civilian on fraudulent charges is a federal crime and I have witnesses. As if summoned, 2 more men entered the office. Real federal marshals, Luke realized, with proper badges and no family vendettas to pursue. Theodore Blackwood, one of them said formally, you're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer, fraud, and conspiracy. As the real marshals led Blackwood away, the office fell into stunned silence. Finally, Coleman cleared his throat. Well, that was exciting. Luke turned to Morrison, his mind reeling with questions. How did you know to come here? Morrison's expression softened slightly. I've been keeping an eye on Evangeline's situation since our last meeting. When I learned that someone was digging into her past, I did some investigating of my own. He looked at Eva with something that might have been paternal pride. I'm sorry it took me so long to clear your name properly, daughter. Eva stared at her father, tears gathering in her eyes. You defended me. I should have done it years ago, Morrison said quietly. I was so consumed with my own guilt about the war that I didn't see how my absence was affecting you. You were trying to fight corruption alone while I was wallowing in self-pity. Luke watched the reunion between father and daughter with a mixture of relief and lingering concern. The immediate threat was over, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too convenient. General, he said carefully, why was Blackwood so determined to destroy us? Revenge for his brother doesn't explain the timing. Morrison's expression darkened. Because someone hired him to discredit you both. Someone with deep pockets and a vested interest in seeing you fail. Who? Before Morrison could answer, Bella's voice came from the office doorway. Papa! Luke spun around, his heart stopping. Bella, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be with Mrs. Rodriguez. I got scared when you didn't come home, Bella said, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his face. And besides, the bad man is coming back. I can feel him getting closer. What bad man? Eva asked, kneeling to Bella's level. The one who wants our land. The one who hired the mean man with the badges. Bella's voice was matter-of-fact despite the frightening content. He's angry that his plan didn't work, and now he's coming himself. Luke felt ice form in his veins. Bella, how can you possibly know that? Because I can feel his anger from here, Bella said simply. It's like a storm getting closer, and he has lots of men with him this time. Morrison was already moving toward the window. How many men, child? 10, maybe 12, Bella said with the certainty she brought to all her observations. And they're not planning to talk. Luke grabbed his rifle and checked the load. Jim, how many deputies can you muster? 3, maybe 4, Coleman replied grimly. Not enough if they're coming in force. Then we make a stand here, Luke said. Eva, can you get Bella to safety? I'm not leaving you, Eva said firmly. Neither am I, Bella added. You need me. I can tell you where they are, even in the dark. Before Luke could protest, the sound of hoofbeats filled the street outside. Many hoofbeats approaching fast. Positions, Morrison barked, slipping back into his military command voice. Sterling, take the back window. Coleman, the side. Evangeline, can you handle a rifle? Better than most men, Eva replied, accepting the weapon Coleman handed her. Luke found himself crouched by the rear window, his rifle ready with Bella pressed safely against the wall behind him. Outside, he could hear men positioning themselves around the building. You in there? A voice called from the street. Send out the woman and the doctor, and nobody else gets hurt. Morrison appeared at the front window. Counteroffer, he shouted back. Leave now, and we won't hang you all for attempted murder. Harsh laughter echoed from outside. I don't think you understand your situation, General. You're outnumbered and outgunned, and you're under arrest for conspiracy and attempted kidnapping. Morrison replied coolly. This is your last chance to surrender peacefully. The answer came in the form of gunfire, multiple rifles opening up simultaneously, shattering windows and splintering wood. Luke ducked as bullets whined overhead, his heart pounding with the familiar rhythm of combat. Beside him, Eva was returning fire with deadly accuracy, her face calm and focused. Papa, Bella whispered, 3 men are trying to get in through the back door. Luke spun toward the rear entrance just as the first attacker burst through. He fired without hesitation, and the man dropped. 2 more followed, and Luke found himself in a desperate firefight in the confined space. The battle lasted perhaps 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the firing finally stopped, the silence was deafening. Everyone all right? Morrison called. Here, Luke replied, checking Eva and Bella for injuries. Both were unharmed, though Eva had a graze on her left arm. Coleman appeared from behind his overturned desk. Lost 1 deputy, but we got most of them. Most? Luke asked. The leader got away, Morrison said grimly, but not before I got a good look at him. His expression was cold with recognition. Jackson Steele, railroad magnate and land speculator. He's been trying to buy up this entire valley for months. Luke felt the pieces clicking together. The mining operation, the medical emergency, even Blackwood's appearance, it was all designed to discredit us and force us to sell. Or drive us away, Eva added. Either way, he gets the land cheap. Bella spoke up from her position against the wall. He's not giving up, you know. I can still feel his anger out there. He'll try again. Morrison holstered his pistol and looked around the bullet-riddled office. Not if I can help it. Steele may have money and influence, but I have something better. What's that? Luke asked. Morrison smiled grimly. The truth, and friends in very high places. As dawn broke over Pine Ridge, the crisis seemed to have passed, but Luke couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their troubles. Jackson Steele was still out there, still determined to claim their valley, and men like Steele didn't give up easily. But as Luke looked around at the people who had stood with him, Eva, Morrison, even Sheriff Coleman, he realized something important. He wasn't facing this fight alone anymore. For better or worse, they were all in this together now. The question was, would it be enough? The next 2 weeks passed in deceptive calm. Jackson Steele seemed to have vanished like smoke, taking his hired guns with him. But Luke knew better than to trust the quiet. He'd seen enough war to recognize the lull before a final assault. Eva had thrown herself into organizing the town's medical supplies, working alongside Luke as they prepared for whatever might come. Their partnership had deepened beyond mere professional cooperation. They moved together with the fluid synchronization of 2 people who understood each other completely. You're worried, Eva observed one evening as they inventoried bandages and medicine in their makeshift clinic. Luke paused in his counting. Steele's not the kind of man who gives up after one defeat. He's planning something bigger. Then we'll be ready for him, Eva said simply, her green eyes steady with quiet determination. Luke marveled at her calm confidence. This woman who had traveled west to uncover family secrets had become the cornerstone of their defense, the heart of their small community's resistance against corruption and greed. Eva, he said softly, setting down his clipboard, what we're facing, it could get dangerous, really dangerous. If you want to leave a Lucas Sterling, Eva's voice carried the same authority she'd used when they first worked together to save those trapped miners. I am exactly where I belong. Don't insult me by suggesting otherwise. Luke pulled her into his arms, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. All of you, the doctor, the father, the man who's brave enough to fight for what matters. Their moment was interrupted by Bella's voice from the doorway. Papa, Miss Eva, there's someone here to see you. Luke tensed automatically, his hand moving toward his gun. Who is it, little stuff? A lady. She smells like expensive soap and secrets. Bella tilted her head with that peculiar concentration she brought to her observations. But not bad secrets. Sad ones. Luke and Eva exchanged glances. They followed Bella to the front door, where they found an elegantly dressed woman in her 40s waiting on the porch. She was beautiful in a brittle way with perfectly arranged blonde hair and clothes that spoke of serious money. Dr. Sterling, Miss Morrison, the woman's voice carried traces of both refinement and exhaustion. I'm Victoria Steele. I believe you know my husband. Luke's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon, but something in the woman's posture, defeated, almost pleading, made him pause. Mrs. Steele, he said carefully, what brings you here? I've come to warn you. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. Jackson is planning something terrible. Something that will destroy not just you, but this entire valley. Ava stepped forward, her nurse's instincts recognizing genuine distress. Come inside. You look exhausted. Victoria followed them into the warm kitchen, accepting the cup of coffee Eva pressed into her hands with shaking fingers. Up close, Luke could see the shadows under her eyes, the way her expensive clothes hung loose on her frame. How long has it been since you have eaten? Eva asked gently. I'm not sure. Days, maybe. Victoria took a sip of coffee and seemed to steady slightly. I had to wait until Jackson left Denver. He has people watching me. Why? Luke asked. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Because I know too much about his business practices, about the things he's done to acquire land for the railroad consortium. She reached into her traveling bag and pulled out a leather portfolio. I have documents, proof of bribes, intimidation, even murders that were made to look like accidents. Luke felt his blood chill. You're saying your husband is a killer. I'm saying my husband has killed for land before, and he'll do it again if it means getting this valley. Victoria's voice strengthened with resolve. I can't be part of it anymore. I won't. Aviva knelt beside Victoria's chair, taking the woman's trembling hands in her own. What changed? What made you decide to come forward? Victoria's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. He told me what he was planning for you, for your daughter. She looked at Bella, who was listening intently from her chair by the fire. No child should suffer for their parents' defiance. No matter what Jackson thinks I owe him. What does he owe you? Luke asked quietly. My silence, Victoria replied. About his first wife. About how she really died. The kitchen fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Finally, Eva spoke. Tell us everything. Victoria took a shuddering breath. Jackson's first wife, Margaret, discovered his illegal land dealings 5 years ago. She threatened to expose him unless he stopped. So he arranged for her carriage to have an accident on a mountain road. Luke felt sick. And you know this how? Because I helped him plan it. Victoria's voice was barely audible. I was his mistress, then desperate to become his wife. I thought if Margaret was gone, he would marry me and we could start fresh. Eva's grip on Victoria's hands tightened. But that's not what happened. He did marry me, but the guilt, it ate away at everything. And then I realized that if he could kill Margaret so coldly, he could kill anyone who threatened his plans, including me if I ever became inconvenient. Bella spoke up softly from her chair. You're not a bad person. You're just scared and sorry. Victoria turned toward Bella with wonder. How can you possibly know that child? Because sorry feels different from bad, Bella said simply. Sorry wants to fix things. Bad just wants to hurt more. The wisdom in those words seemed to strengthen Victoria's resolve. She opened her portfolio and spread documents across the kitchen table. These are the deeds to properties Jackson has acquired through fraud and intimidation over the past 3 years. This is correspondence between him and railroad officials discussing removing obstacles to their planned route. And this, she pulled out a telegram. This is his plan for Pine Ridge Valley. Luke read the telegram and felt his blood turn to ice. He's planning to blow up the dam upstream, make it look like an accident caused by heavy rains. The entire valley would flood, Eva breathed. Everyone would have to evacuate, and he could buy the land for nothing. When? Luke asked grimly. Tomorrow night, Victoria replied, during the storm that's forecast to move through. He's counting on the weather to provide cover for the explosion. Luke was already reaching for his coat. I have to warn the town, organize an evacuation. Wait, Eva said sharply. If we evacuate, we lose everything. Our home, our practice, the life we've built here. And what's to stop him from trying the same thing again? So what do you suggest? Eva's eyes were bright with determined fire. We stop him. Permanently. Victoria looked up from her papers. You can't just confront Jackson directly. He has too many men, too much firepower. But we have something he doesn't expect, Bella said thoughtfully. We have the truth. And people who will fight for it. Luke looked at his daughter, amazed once again by her wisdom. What are you thinking, little Sor? I'm thinking that sometimes the best way to stop a bad man is to let everyone see how bad he really is, Bella said. And I have an idea. 2 hours later, the town meeting was packed. Word had spread quickly through Pine Ridge about Victoria Steele's revelations, and every rancher, merchant, and settler in the valley had come to hear the evidence. Luke stood at the front of the room, Victoria beside him, with her documents spread on a table for all to see. Sheriff Coleman had verified the authenticity of the papers, and the grim reality of Jackson Steele's plans was undeniable. So what do we do? Asked Jake Morrison from the mining operation. Even if we post guards at the dam, Steele has enough men to overwhelm us. We don't guard the dam, Eva said, standing to address the crowd. We let him come to us, but on our terms. Murmurs rippled through the room. Elder Joseph Crow Feather, who had been sitting quietly in the back, rose to his feet. The young woman speaks wisdom, he said in his gravelly voice. Sometimes the best trap is one that doesn't look like a trap at all. Luke felt the pieces of Bella's plan clicking together in his mind. We make Steele think his plan is working. Let him believe we're evacuating in panic while we're actually preparing an ambush. But where? Coleman asked. If he's planning to blow the dam, he'll approach from the North Ridge. That's rough country, plenty of places for his men to hide. Bella spoke up from her seat in the front row. Not if we're already there waiting for him. All eyes turned to the 9-year-old girl who had somehow become the strategic heart of their resistance. The old mine shafts, she continued, the ones that were abandoned after the cave-in last year. They run all through the North Ridge. We could position people there without being seen. Elder Crowfeather nodded approvingly. The child sees clearly. My people know those tunnels well. We used them for shelter during the winter hunts in the old days. It's dangerous, Luke said. If something goes wrong, people could get trapped underground. More dangerous than letting Steele flood the entire valley, Eva asked pointedly. The room fell silent as people considered their options. Finally, Jake Morrison spoke up. I've got enough mining equipment to properly shore up those tunnels. If we're going to do this, we do it right. One by one, other voices joined in. Mrs. Chen offered to coordinate supplies. Doc Matthews volunteered to set up a field medical station. Tommy Reeves and the other young ranch hands eagerly signed up for the dangerous work of tunnel preparation. By the time the meeting ended, they had a plan. Risky, complicated, but with a real chance of success. As the crowd dispersed, Victoria Steele remained behind, looking lost and uncertain. Where will you go? Eva asked gently. You can't return to your husband, not after this. I have a sister in San Francisco, Victoria said quietly. She's been begging me to visit for years. Maybe it's time I took her up on that invitation. Luke counted out money from the town's emergency fund. This should get you there safely. And Mrs. Steele, thank you. You've saved a lot of lives tonight. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I just hope it's enough to balance the scales for Margaret. As Victoria's carriage disappeared into the night, Luke found himself standing on the porch with Eva and Bella looking up at the star-filled Sikidamu. Are you ready for this? Eva asked softly. No, Luke admitted, but we're going to do it anyway. Papa, Bella said thoughtfully, do you think we'll win? Luke considered the question seriously. I think we'll do what's right. And sometimes that's the same thing as winning. The next day dawned gray and heavy with the promise of storms. True to the weather predictions, thick clouds were building over the mountains, and the air had the electric tension that preceded violent weather. Luke spent the morning making final preparations with Jake Morrison and his crew. The abandoned mine tunnels had been reinforced and equipped with emergency supplies. Carefully concealed observation posts offered clear views of the approaches to the dam. If everything went according to plan, Steele and his men would walk directly into a trap. If it didn't, Luke tried not to think about the alternative. Nervous? Eva asked, finding him checking his rifle for the dozenth time. Terrified, Luke admitted. I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Then think about what happens if we do nothing, Eva said firmly. This valley, our home, everything we've built together, it all disappears under 20 feet of water. Luke nodded, knowing she was right. They were fighting for more than just land or property. They were fighting for the right to build a life on their own terms, free from the corruption and greed of men like Jackson Steele. As afternoon faded into evening, the first fat raindrops began to fall. Soon a steady downpour was drumming against the windows, providing perfect cover for what was to come. Luke kissed Eva goodbye at the clinic, where she would coordinate medical support for the operation. Then he made his way through the rain to the mine entrance, where Coleman and a dozen volunteers were waiting. "Everyone knows their positions?" Luke asked. Nods all around. These were good people, ranchers and miners, storekeepers and farmers, united in their determination to protect their homes. "Remember," Coleman added, "we want them alive if possible. They are more valuable as witnesses than as corpses." Luke checked his pocket watch. Almost 9 o'clock. If Victoria's information was accurate, Steele's men would be approaching the dam within the hour. "Let's go," he said quietly. The climb through the mine tunnels was treacherous in the rain, but Jake Morrison's reinforcements held solid. Within 30 minutes, Luke found himself crouched in a concealed position, overlooking the dam, rain streaming down his face as he waited for the enemy to arrive. He didn't have to wait long. Just before 10 o'clock, dark shapes began moving through the trees just below. Luke counted 12 men, all heavily armed, approaching the dam with military precision. At their head was a tall figure Luke recognized from wanted posters, Jackson Steele himself, come to personally oversee the destruction of Pine Ridge Valley. Luke raised his hands, signaling the other hidden defenders. Everyone was in position. Now came the waiting. Steele and his men reached the dam and began unpacking their equipment. Even from a distance, Luke could see the barrels of black powder they had intended to use for the explosion. "Hurry up," Steele's voice carried clearly through the rain. "I want this done before the storm gets worse." Luke watched the men position their explosives with professional efficiency. These weren't ordinary hired guns. They were demolition experts, probably former military engineers, which meant they knew their business. If they succeeded in blowing the dam, the resulting flood would be catastrophic. "Now," Luke whispered. The signal was passed from position to position, and suddenly the night exploded with shouts and gunfire as the hidden defenders revealed themselves. "Jackson Steele," Coleman's voice boomed through a speaking trumpet. "You're surrounded, surrender now, and nobody gets hurt." Steele's response was to pull out his pistol and start shooting. His men followed suit, and the peaceful mountain valley erupted into a war zone. The battle was fierce but brief. Caught in a crossfire from multiple directions with no cover except the dam structure itself, Steele's men were quickly overwhelmed. When the shooting stopped, 8 of Steele's men were wounded but alive. 2 had been killed in the firefight, and Jackson Steele himself. "Where is he?" Coleman shouted, searching among the prisoners. Luke's blood ran cold. In the chaos of the battle, Steele had vanished. "The explosives," Jake Morrison called out. "They're still armed." Luke ran toward the dam, his heart pounding. If Steele had managed to light the fuses before escaping, he found the barrels of black powder exactly where Steele's men had placed them, but the fuses were dark. No immediate danger. But where was Steele? "Luke," Eva's voice came from behind him, filled with terror. "He's not here. Steele isn't here." Luke spun around, a horrible certainty growing in his chest. "Bella. He's going after Bella." They ran through the rain-soaked night, Luke's heart pounding with our parental terror. Steele was a man who had murdered his own wife for threatening his plans. He wouldn't hesitate to hurt a child. The lights of their house appeared through the trees, warm and welcoming. Too welcoming. "Something's wrong," Eva breathed. "The front door's open." Luke drew his pistol and approached carefully. The house was eerily quiet, with no sign of Mrs. Rodriguez, who was supposed to be watching Bella. They found her in the kitchen, tied to a chair but unharmed. "He took her," Mrs. Rodriguez said as Eva cut her bonds. "The little one tried to hide, but he found her anyway. Said she was his insurance against you following him." Luke felt his world collapse around him. "How long ago?" "Maybe 20 minutes. He had a wagon waiting." Luke was already moving toward the door when Eva caught his arm. "Wait," she said urgently. "Where would he take her? He has to know we'll follow." "Somewhere defensible," Luke said grimly. "Somewhere he can see us coming." Mrs. Rodriguez spoke up. "He asked me about the old fortress, the stone building up on Eagle's Peak." wanted to know if the road was still passable. Luke's blood went cold. Eagle's Peak was a natural fortress, a single narrow road leading to an abandoned stone structure that had once served as a military outpost. It was the perfect place for a final stand, and the perfect place to hold a hostage. "How long to get there?" Eva asked, checking her rifle. "An hour by horseback in good weather," Luke replied. "In this rain, maybe 2. Then we need to leave now." Luke looked at Eva, this woman who had come to Colorado seeking truth and found love, who had stood with him through every crisis and challenge. "You don't have to come," he said quietly. "This isn't your—" "She's my daughter too," Eva interrupted fiercely. "And I'm not losing her to that monster." Luke pulled Eva into his arms, holding her tight against the storm and the fear and the terrible possibility that they might be too late. "Then we go together," he said. "Together," Eva agreed. As they prepared to ride out into the storm, Luke found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Eva had answered his advertisement for a mail-order bride, but she'd become so much more than that. She'd become his partner, his equal, his match in every way that mattered. Now they would face their greatest test together, not as a desperate rancher and a woman with secrets, but as two people united by love and determined to protect their family at any cost. The rain pounded down as they rode into the night following the treacherous mountain road toward Eagle's Peak. Behind them, the lights of Pine Ridge Valley twinkled like scattered stars. Ahead lay darkness, danger, and the most important battle of their lives. But they rode together, and in that togetherness, Luke found strength he didn't know he possessed. Whatever waited for them at Eagle's Peak, they would face it as they had faced everything else as a family. The ride to Eagle's Peak was a nightmare of slippery trails and driving rain. Luke's horse stumbled twice on the rocky path, and only Eva's quick reflexes prevented a fall that could have been fatal. By the time they reached the final approach to the fortress, both riders and horses were exhausted. But there, silhouetted against the storm-lashed sky, was their destination. The old military outpost was a massive stone structure built into the living rock of the mountain peak. A single narrow causeway led to the main entrance with sheer drops on both sides. It was exactly the kind of defensive position a desperate man would choose for his last stand. "There," Eva pointed through the rain. "Lights in the tower windows." Luke squinted through the storm and saw she was right. The golden glow of lamplight was visible in the highest windows of the fortress. "He's got the high ground and a clear view of our approach," Luke said grimly. "This is going to be difficult." "Papa!" The voice came from far above them, barely audible over the storm, but Luke would have recognized Bella's call from any distance. "I'm here, little Steiner," he shouted back. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but Papa, you need to be careful. He's got—" Bella's voice was cut off, presumably by Steele himself. "Dr. Sterling," Steele's voice boomed down from the fortress. "How good of you to join me, and you brought the lovely Miss Morrison. How touching." Luke and Eva dismounted at the base of the causeway, taking what shelter they could behind a pile of fallen stones. "What do you want, Steele?" Luke called up. "What I've always wanted. This valley. My railroad consortium is prepared to pay handsomely for clear passage through Pine Ridge." Steele's voice carried easily through the night air. "All you have to do is convince the other property owners to sell. And if we refuse, then I'm afraid your daughter might suffer an unfortunate accident. These old fortresses can be quite dangerous, especially for blind children." Luke felt rage build in his chest, but Eva's hand on his arm kept him from doing anything rash. "What guarantee do we have that you'll keep your word?" Eva called out. Steele's laughter echoed off the stone walls. "The same guarantee your husband gave those soldiers he couldn't save during the war. The same guarantee you gave when you stole medical supplies." "We've been cleared of those charges," Luke replied. "Your brother Nathan confessed to the corruption before he died." "My brother was a weakling who let guilt destroy him," Steele shot back. "I'm not making the same mistake." Luke looked at Eva, seeing his own desperate determination reflected in her green eyes. "I'm going up," he said quietly. "Not alone. Eva, not alone." Her voice brooked no argument. "We're partners, remember, in everything." Luke nodded, knowing she was right. They'd face this together just as they'd faced everything else. The climb up the causeway was treacherous in the rain, but they moved carefully, using every bit of cover the ancient stonework provided. Steele's voice continued to echo from above. But Luke noticed he wasn't shooting at them, which meant he really did need them alive, at least long enough to force the land sales. They reached the main entrance to find the massive wooden doors standing open. Beyond was a courtyard surrounded by high stone walls, with the main tower rising in the center. "Welcome to my humble fortress," Steele's voice came from the tower above. "Please come in. Your daughter is so looking forward to seeing you again." Luke and Eva entered the courtyard cautiously, weapons ready. The space was empty except for puddles of rainwater and the occasional piece of debris from years of abandonment. "The stairs are to your right," Steele called helpfully. "Do watch your step. The stonework is rather old." They found the spiral staircase leading up the tower and began to climb. Each step took them higher, further from escape, deeper into Steele's trap. But with each step, they were also getting closer to Bella. The stairs ended at a heavy wooden door. Luke tried the handle and found it unlocked. "After you, Drit," Steele's voice came from within. Luke pushed open the door and stepped into a large circular room that had once served as the fortress's command center. Windows on all sides offered commanding views of the valley below, though tonight there was nothing to see but rain and darkness. Jackson Steele stood in the center of the room, a pistol in his right hand and his left arm around Bella's shoulders. The child looked frightened but unharmed. "Papa," Bella said quietly, "I'm sorry, I tried to hide, but—" "Hush, child," Steele said not unkindly. "You've done nothing wrong. This is between me and your father." Luke kept his rifle trained on Steele, but he didn't have a clear shot with Bella so close. "Let her go," he said steadily. "She's just a child. She has nothing to do with your land deals." "On the contrary, she has everything to do with them," Steele replied. "You see, Dr. Sterling, I've discovered something interesting about your daughter. She has quite remarkable abilities for a blind child." Luke felt cold dread creep up his spine. "What do you mean?" "She knew I was coming before I arrived. She described the layout of my camp before she'd ever seen it. She even told me things about my past that no child could possibly know." Steele's eyes glittered with a mixture of greed and something that might have been fear. There are people back east who would pay handsomely for someone with such gifts. Eva stepped forward, her rifle also trained on Steele. "You're talking about selling a child like she's livestock." "I'm talking about maximizing assets," Steele corrected. "The railroad deal is profitable, but your daughter could be worth far more in the right hands." Luke felt something snap inside him. All the restraint, all the careful planning, all the civilized attempts at negotiation, none of it mattered when someone threatened his child. "You'll have to kill me first," he said quietly. "That can be arranged," Steele replied. "But first I need you to write a letter to the other property owners, convincing them to sell to my railroad consortium. And if I refuse," Steele's grip on Bella tightened, "then we'll see just how good the little one's gift of foresight really is. Perhaps she can predict when I'm going to push her off this tower." Bella spoke up suddenly, her voice calm and clear. "You won't push me off the tower." Steele looked down at her with surprise. "Is that your gift, talking child?" "No," Bella said simply. "That's just me knowing that you're not really a killer. You're just scared." "Scared," Steele's voice cracked slightly. "Scared that you'll end up like your first wife. Scared that someone will find out what you really are. Scared that all the money in the world won't make people love you the way they loved her." Luke watched in amazement as his 9-year-old daughter somehow cut straight to the heart of Jackson Steele's deepest fears. "You don't know what you're talking about," Steele said, but his voice had lost its commanding authority. "I know that you loved Margaret," Bella continued, "really loved her. And when she threatened to leave you, you didn't kill her to protect your business. You killed her because you couldn't stand the thought of living without her love." Steele's face went white. "Stop talking." "But killing her didn't stop the hurt, did it?" Bella's voice was gentle, almost pitying. "It just made it worse, because now you have to carry her death forever, and you still don't have her love." "Shut up." Steele pressed the pistol against Bella's temple, his hand shaking. Luke tensed, ready to risk everything to save his daughter, but Bella wasn't finished. "The thing is," she said conversationally, "love doesn't come from making people do what you want. It comes from letting them choose to stay. And Margaret was choosing to stay, wasn't she? She just wanted you to be better." Steele's face crumpled. "She was going to leave me. She said she couldn't live with what I'd become." "No," Bella said gently. She said she couldn't live with what you were becoming. There's a difference. The pistol in Steele's hand was shaking now, his composure completely shattered by a blind child's insight into his wounded soul. She wanted to help you change, Bella continued, but you were too scared to let her. So you killed the only person who ever really loved you. Steele let out a sound that was half sob, half roar of anguish. His grip on Bella loosened, and the child stepped smoothly away from him. Papa, she said calmly, now would be good. Luke didn't hesitate. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and tackled Steele, sending the man's pistol skittering across the stone floor. They grappled briefly, but Steele's heart wasn't in the fight anymore. He collapsed against the wall, his face buried in his hands, sobbing with 3 years of suppressed grief and guilt. I loved her, he whispered. God help me. I loved her more than anything, and I killed her. Iva picked up Steele's discarded pistol while Luke gathered Bella into his arms, checking her for injuries. Are you all right, little stone? He asked urgently. I'm fine, Papa. Bella hugged him tightly, then pulled back to look at him with those unseeing eyes that somehow saw everything that mattered. I knew you'd come for me. I could feel your love all the way across the valley. Luke felt tears he didn't know he'd been holding spill down his cheeks. Always, little star. Always. Eva joined their embrace, and for a moment they were just a family, holding each other close while the storm raged outside. Finally, Luke looked over at Jackson Steele, who was still slumped against the wall in the grip of his breakdown. What do we do with him? Eva asked quietly. Luke considered their options. Steele was a broken man, his grandiose plans crumbled to dust by a child's insight into his wounded heart. We take him back to town, Luke said finally. Let the law decide his fate. He has crimes to answer for. But as they prepared to leave the fortress, Steele looked up at them with eyes that were empty of everything except pain. She knew, he whispered. Margaret knew what I was becoming, and she tried to save me anyway. And he couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. They all understood. The ride back to Pine Ridge was quiet, with Steele riding between Luke and Eva like a broken ghost. He made no attempt to escape, showed no sign of his former arrogance or cruelty. He was just a man carrying a weight of guilt too heavy for any soul to bear. They reached town as dawn was breaking, painting the rain-washed valley in shades of gold and rose. Sheriff Coleman was waiting with a dozen men ready to form a posse if the rescue had failed. Thank God, Coleman breathed when he saw them approaching. We heard gunshots from the direction of the peak. It's over, Luke said, simply dismounting and helping Bella down from her horse. Steele surrendered without resistance, allowing Coleman to place him under arrest. As they led him away, he turned back to look at Bella one last time. Thank you, he said quietly, for helping me remember who I used to be. Bella nodded gravely. Everyone deserves to be remembered for their best self, even if they forgot it for a while. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Luke Sterling stood at the altar of the Pine Ridge Church, watching the most beautiful woman in Colorado Territory walk down the aisle toward him. Eva wore a simple white dress that she'd sewn herself with wildflowers from their meadow in her hair. She'd never looked more radiant, more perfectly herself. Bella walked beside her as maid of honor, scattering rose petals with the careful precision she brought to all her tasks. The child's face glowed with happiness, and Luke marveled at how much she'd grown in the months since their confrontation with Steele. The valley had prospered since Jackson Steele's arrest and the exposure of his criminal conspiracy. The railroad consortium had agreed to a fair route that didn't require destroying anyone's homes or livelihoods. Property values had risen, new families had moved in, and Pine Ridge was becoming a real town. But more importantly, their little family had flourished. Luke had officially reopened his medical practice, working in partnership with Eva to provide care for the entire valley. Doc Matthews had retired, confident that his patients were in capable hands. Bella had learned to read not just Braille but regular print by tracing raised letters Eva had created, using a special technique she'd learned back east. The child's remarkable abilities continued to develop, but now they were channeled into helping others rather than surviving crisis. And Luke had learned to trust in happiness again, to believe that some good things were meant to last. As Eva reached the altar and took his hands, Luke saw their whole future reflected in her green eyes. More children, perhaps. Years of working side by side to heal and help others. growing old together in the valley they'd fought to protect. Dearly beloved, the preacher began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Dr. Lucas Sterling and Miss Evangeline Morrison in holy matrimony. Luke barely heard the familiar words. He was too busy marveling at the miracle that had brought Eva into his life. The mail-order bride advertisement that had seemed like a desperate last resort, but had actually been the beginning of everything good and true and worth fighting for. Do you, Lucas, take Evangeline to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do. Luke said, his voice strong and sure. Do you, Evangeline, take Lucas to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Eva replied, her voice warm with joy and absolute certainty. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Luke cupped Eva's face in his hands, looking into her eyes one more time as an unmarried man. I love you, Mrs. Sterling, he whispered. I love you too, Dr. Sterling, she whispered back. Their kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, not just for the wedding day, but for all the days to come. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Bella stepped between them and took both their hands. Now we're really a family, she announced to the assembled crowd, her voice bright with satisfaction. The congregation erupted in laughter and applause, and Luke felt his heart overflow with gratitude. He'd placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride because he thought his daughter needed a mother. What he'd found instead was a woman who completed their family, healed their wounded hearts, and showed them all that love was the strongest force in the world, stronger than guilt, stronger than fear, stronger than greed or hatred, or the worst that people could do to each other. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Luke caught sight of a familiar figure in the back pew. General Morrison had kept his promise to attend the wedding, and he was wiping tears from his eyes as he watched. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Luke caught sight of a familiar figure in the back pew. General Morrison had kept his promise to attend the wedding, and he was wiping tears from his eyes as he watched his daughter begin her new life. After the ceremony, Morrison approached them on the church steps, his military bearing softened by genuine emotion. Congratulations, he said, embracing Eva carefully. You look radiant, daughter. Thank you for coming, Father, Eva replied, and Luke could hear the joy in her voice at being able to say those words without pain or anger. Morrison turned to Luke and extended his hand. Dr. Sterling, I'm trusting you with the most precious thing in my world. I understand the responsibility, sir, Luke replied, clasping Morrison's hand firmly. And I promise you, she'll be treasured every day of our lives. I know she will be. Morrison's voice was gruff with emotion. I've seen how you look at each other. It reminds me of how I used to look at Eva's mother before the war took the best parts of me away. Bella tugged on Morrison's sleeve. Grandfather Morrison, are you going to stay for the party? Morrison looked down at the child with surprise and delight. Grandfather Morrison, I rather like the sound of that. Good, Bella said matter-of-factly, because you're family now, and family should be together for important things. As the wedding party made their way to the reception at the Sterling Ranch, Luke marveled at how perfectly everything had come together. Not just the wedding, but their entire life in Pine Ridge Valley. The ranch house had been expanded over the winter with a proper medical clinic attached and guest rooms for Eva's father when he visited. The gardens Eva had planted were blooming magnificently, filling the air with the scent of roses and lavender. Tables had been set up in the meadow where Emma had first learned to navigate by sound and touch. Now those same fields were filled with laughter music and the celebration of new beginnings. Papa? Miss Eva, I mean Mama Eva, Bella corrected herself with a grin. Will you dance with me? Luke and Eva exchanged a look of pure joy. They talked with Bella about what to call Eva after the wedding, leaving the choice entirely up to her. That she'd chosen Mama spoke volumes about the bonds they'd built as a family. We'd be honored, Eva said, taking Bella's hands while Luke took her shoulders, and together they swayed to the fiddle music floating across the meadow. As the afternoon wore on, Luke found quiet moments to marvel at the transformation in all their lives. Eva had found not just love, but a purpose that used all her skills and intelligence. Bella had discovered that being different wasn't a limitation, but a gift that could help others. And he He had learned that second chances were possible, that healing came in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest adventures began with the simplest acts of faith. Dr. Sterling. Luke turned to find Victoria Steele approaching, looking healthier and more at peace than he'd ever seen her. She'd stayed in San Francisco with her sister, but had returned for the wedding at Eva's invitation. Mrs. Steele, thank you for coming. I wanted to give you this, Victoria said, handing him an envelope. It's a letter from Jackson. He asked me to deliver it personally. Luke accepted the letter with some trepidation. Jackson Steele was serving a 20-year sentence in the territorial prison, his railroad conspiracy having been exposed and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. He's changed, Victoria continued quietly. Prison has been hard on him, but he's finally facing that what he did to Margaret and to all the other people he hurt over the years. Luke opened the letter and read Dr. Sterling and Mrs. Sterling. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, and I'm not writing to seek it. I simply want you to know that your daughter's words that night in the fortress saved whatever was left of my soul. I spent 3 years trying to fill the emptiness Margaret's death left behind by accumulating power and wealth. But Bella showed me that the emptiness wasn't something to be filled, it was something to be faced and grieved and eventually perhaps healed. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for my crimes. I've already arranged for my remaining assets to be distributed to the families I've wronged over the years. It's not enough, but it's a start. Tell Bella that she was right. Margaret wasn't trying to leave me that day. She was trying to save me. I was just too afraid and too proud to let her. I hope you find all the happiness that Margaret and I might have had if I'd been brave enough to accept her love instead of trying to control it. With sincere remorse and genuine gratitude, Jackson Steele, Luke folded the letter thoughtfully and looked across the meadow to where Bella was teaching some of the younger children a clapping game she'd invented. How is he really? Luke asked Victoria. Broken, but in a way that might allow healing, she replied. He started teaching other prisoners to read and write. Says Bella inspired him to find ways to help instead of hurt. Luke nodded, thinking about redemption and second chances, and the mysterious ways that good could emerge from even the darkest circumstances. As the sun began to set over Pine Ridge Valley, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the wedding guests gathered for one final toast. Elder Joseph Crow Feather stood and raised his cup of cider. In the old days, he said in his resonant voice, my people believed that when two souls found each other across great distances and many obstacles, it was a sign that the spirits approved of their union. He looked at Luca and Eva, then at Bella standing between them. Today, we have witnessed such a union, not just of two people, but of three souls who were meant to be a family. May your love grow stronger with each passing season. May your home be filled with laughter and healing, and may your children carry forward the wisdom and courage you have shown us all. Hear, hear, the crowd responded, raising their glasses. As the toasts continued and the stars began to appear overhead, Luke pulled Eva close and marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. No regrets? He asked softly. Only one, Eva replied, looking up at him with sparkling eyes. Luke's heart skipped. What's that? That it took us both so long to find each other, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. As their lips met, Luke heard Bella's voice calling from across the meadow. Papa, Mama, Eva, come quick. The fireflies are dancing. They broke apart laughing and hurried to join their daughter, who was standing in the center of the meadow with her arms outstretched, surrounded by hundreds of blinking fireflies. They're celebrating too, Bella announced with satisfaction. Even the fireflies know this is a special day. Luke and Eva joined her in the middle of the magical light display, their arms around each other and their daughter surrounded by the golden glow of fireflies and the silver light of stars. In that moment, Luke understood something profound about love and faith and the courage required to build a life worth living. Sometimes the greatest adventures didn't require traveling to distant lands or facing down dangerous enemies. Sometimes the greatest adventure was simply opening your heart to love, trusting in the goodness of other people, and having the courage to build something beautiful in a world that often seemed determined to tear things down. The mail-order bride who had answered his desperate advertisement had become so much more than he'd ever dared to hope. She'd become his partner, his equal, his match in every way that mattered. And together with Bella's wisdom to guide them and their love to sustain them, they were ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. As the fireflies danced around them and the stars wheeled overhead, three hearts beat in perfect harmony, creating a rhythm of love that would echo through all the years to come. The healing was complete, the family was whole, and the future stretched ahead of them like an unwritten book full of blank pages, waiting to be filled with new stories of love, laughter, and the quiet miracles that happen when wounded souls found the courage to heal together. In Pine Ridge Valley, under the vast Colorado sky, a mail-order marriage had become a love story for the ages, and they all lived happily ever after.